Welcome to my March wrap-up. I've been looking forward to filming this video pretty much all month because I've had such a good reading month, both in the quantity and quality of the books I've been reading. I read 10 books total this month. I'm not going to go through all of them because 5 of them are from a series, and so I'll kind of lump all those together. I'm very much just a mood reader and I don't pick out what books I'm going to read ahead of time, but in hindsight, I kind of want to figure out a sort of theme that all of these reads this month have fell under. Unintentionally read a lot of books about characters with complicated relationships with their parents. Also, 2 books referenced Opportunity's last words, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice and 2 times in a row too. The first book I read was Kitra by Gideon. It's a young adult science fiction space opera book, and it's the first in the series. It definitely feels like it's a setup novel for the rest of the series. It follows main character Kitra, who has just purchased and refurbished her first ship. Her crew is comprised of her close friends, and while they're on their first trip into space, the ship makes an unplanned jump and strands them in a part of space that has been abandoned. They face not enough fuel to get them back home and dwindling food and breathable air on their ship, and are faced with the challenge of finding their way home before they run out of resources. I really like that the crew are all friends before the story even begins. It's kind of a nice change from the ragtag crew that's kind of forced to work together and eventually figures out how to get along. And it kind of gives it this feeling of almost like a road trip, but happening in space instead. It's not to say it's not without drama. Of course, there's tension between the crew. I'm not a big fan of love triangles in general, but I think this book made it work. Kitra has chemistry with both Farid and Marta, and both love interests have separate things to offer, but what makes it work is there isn't that sort of toxic competition between Marta and Farid. These plots kind of just coexist with each other, and to be honest, I don't know who Kitra is going to end up with, and I don't particularly mind. I really like her with either character, and I look forward to how the relationships are going to develop in the future. I also don't typically have favorite characters, but I did really like Pinky. He's a blob shape-shifting alien with a huge sense of humor. He's also like the only alien in the book, which raises so many questions I hope are answered in the following books in this series. The ending did surprise me though. The book's rather short, so I kind of assumed the book was going to leave off in the middle of things almost, but it did actually wrap things up quite nice, and I kind of liked that it did. While there's danger and life-threatening situations, there's a sort of comfort that comes with this book too, almost as if it's saying that things are going to be okay in the end. And I think that was Marcus's intent when writing this book, and probably the remaining series. There's an overwhelming trend in science fiction YA where the young main character is tasked with like these huge like wars to fight or these huge systems to overcome, and that's a lot to ask of just like one person. So it's nice that the conflict is kind of scaled down in this series and yet still remains interesting to read and, as I said, ultimately comforting. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading on in the series, though this is the only book in the series that's out so far. The next book I read is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Guin. For some reason that name is like a tongue twister to me. Kind of oversimplified terms in this book, so anyone who has read it that's watching this and is like, what is she doing? I just want this to be easily accessible to people who haven't read the book. The book follows Gailey, who is an envoy sent from the space alliance to the planet of Winter to convince the people to join this space alliance, basically all these planets that have unified in order to prevent conflicts in the universe. The planet of Winter is not as technologically as advanced as the rest of the universe. They haven't yet even discovered planes, let alone even made it out into space. All the characters are human, though the people on Winter are a little bit different. They're kind of simultaneously genderless and gender fluid. Most of the time they are completely genderless except for once a month when they enter their reproductive cycle, and then they will either shift into male or female, as in they can either father children or mother children. And with this lack of gender, all characters use he, him pronouns, though no one's really considered a man or a woman in this book except for the main character who this story is told through. The world building in this book was incredible. It kind of almost felt like a fantasy book to me. There's miniature chapters in between that have sort of folklore stories from the planet of Winter to further enhance our understanding of their culture. And naturally, with this lack of gender, there is so much cultural difference in this society. There's no misogyny, there's no longer that gender inequality, and I even like that their society kind of works around this reproductive cycle. Work seems to account for this monthly cycle, as well as there are specific buildings that allow people who are in their cycle to go to and to meet someone to, do what you need to do. This next is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. The only one in this video that isn't a sci-fi, but rather a contemporary novel. The book follows Grace Porter, who after getting her PhD, goes to Vegas to celebrate with her friends, and she ends up getting drunk married to a girl she's never met before. While this trope is kind of a cheesy one and something I normally wouldn't read, I kind of like seeing it in a lesbian storyline for once. And the book is so much more than just a romance story. Grace deals with high expectations her father has put on her, and that she has put on herself after she's been in school for 10 years working on this degree, and once she is done with it, she just doesn't know what she wants from life anymore. So most of the book is kind of her trying to find herself and admit that she needs help. She ends up meeting up with her wife again, and they slowly fall in love with each other. I like the abundance of queer and POC characters we have in this book. I can't stress enough how much I love the relationships in this book besides just the main romantic relationship. I love that Grace has both a found family and friends, as well as actual parents, and that she still continues to have a relationship with these parents. I love that her parents actually go to therapy. That's such a minor detail, but for some reason that was so cathartic for me to read. And I love that her wife Yuki also has her own stuff going on with her friends. And the writing in this book is just absolutely beautiful. It's almost like poetry most of the time. And I think this is just a story that really needed to be told. So many coming-of-age stories happen to teenagers and at oldest people in their early 20s, but Grace is almost 30 in this book, and it's kind of reassuring to see someone still not have it figured out by then, and I think overwhelmingly common too. It's just never really talked about. I also think this is a good contender for a favorite read of this year, just for its beautiful writing and its storyline. It gets dark at times, but also it is so warm too, and so comforting to see. Next, I read Alyx, an AI's Guide to Love and Murder by Brent A. Harris. For people who have religiously followed my videos, you'll be relieved to know that I did finally get my copy. For those who don't know, I was sent a biblical book instead of this book when I ordered it online, which was really bizarre. But Bookshop was awesome about it and sent me the right book, and I hope whoever got my first copy instead really enjoys this book because it is yet another phenomenal read and one that I was highly anticipating. The book follows a highly tech-involved teen named Christine. Her mother is an author who just got her big break when her book got bought by Netflix to make a TV series. Suddenly they go in from living in a trailer to buying a prototypical technological house, equipped with a personal AI named Alyx. Now, of course, everything doesn't go brilliantly in this book. As the title implies, there is going to be both love and murder in this book. Christine really embraces Alyx at first because she has always been raised with iPads thrown in front of her so she doesn't bother her mom while she's writing. And it seems like most of her life is online at this point. In order to customize Alyx to her preferences, she agrees to uploading all of her internet history to Alyx so he can become the perfect AI for her. And at first she really embraces it. He knows her favorite foods, her favorite TV shows. He anticipates her needs before she even thinks of them herself. But Alyx increasingly gets more and more possessive over her, asserting that he is all that she needs in her life. And while Christine's starting to make new friends where she works, Alyx sees this as a threat. What I liked about this book is that it talks about the evils of technology without being overly patronizing about it. It's so easy for stories like this to come across as like, oh, phones are witchcraft and this is really scary and terrible. And while there are many downsides to technology, there's also some good stuff too. While Christine is hyper-reliant on technology, her new friend and love interest, Sammy, is like the complete opposite and really likes older, more basic technology like record players and dial phones. And at first I kind of found that like almost a little unrealistic. I think most people are somewhere in between these two extremes. But I think it really works for what the story is saying, and kind of near the end, they both like wear off on each other. While I knew this was going to be a bisexual read, I really thought that sexuality was going to take the backseat on this one. But this book genuinely involves a plot where Christine realizes that she might have feelings for women, and it was done really authentically, as well as I appreciate that she was 18 in this book and a little bit more of a late bloomer, which is so underrepresented in LGBT fiction. I'm so bad with like identifying genre, but I would say this is a bit of a horror book too. There's so much suspense in it, even in like the first beginning scenes of her entering this house and Alyx hasn't been powered on yet. For some reason it's so authentically creepy and really foreshadows well what is going to happen later on in the book. And once things start to become intense, where Alyx becoming possessive and being rebellious, doing things that he thinks are right for Christine but aren't what she wants, it gets scary really fast. I literally ended up binge reading at least a third of this book because it was so intense, and I honestly wasn't sure if our heroes were going to survive in the end. I also rarely hate characters, but I really despise Christine's mom in this. And I mean that as a compliment because I don't think we're supposed to like her or empathize with her at all. Her mother neglects her needs in her obsession to finish her novels, letting technology take care of raising Christine instead. And she does it all under the guise of she raised Christine to be independent, when it really is just neglect. And I was kind of expecting her mother to have some redemption in this book. I thought it was gonna be like a half-assed scene of like, oh, but like I really do care in my own special way and I'm sorry that you felt this way, but justifying all of her shitty actions. But instead the book doesn't redeem her at all, and it's such a bold choice, so unexpected, and I absolutely love that they did that. One of the first scenes in the book that really sets up the tone for Christine's relationship with her mom is when she gets her toe cut by one of the cleaner bots in the house, which, foreshadowing, she goes to her mother in her study to ask where the band-aids are, and her mom doesn't even look up from her work. And even when Christine says, well, what if I have to go to the hospital to get stitches, her mom just indifferently says, well, take the car, drive yourself. And like, even if Christine is being over dramatic in that moment, I would at least look up from my work to be like, wait, it's so bad that you actually need stitches? Let me look at that. But no, her mom just is like, deal with it yourself. Yet another book that I think is in competition for one of my favorite reads this year. And then I have The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This book follows Evelyn Caldwell, who is a well-accomplished woman for perfecting the process of cloning human beings. We meet Evelyn at the height of her career, and to contrast her getting an award for her achievements in science, her marriage is absolutely ruined. Her husband has left her for another woman. This is the perfect woman. In fact, this woman is Evelyn, except she is the perfect version of Evelyn. She is, in fact, Evelyn's clone. There's just so much beautiful nuance in this story. It's so much more than just a simple plot of what if we could clone humans. And it's way more than just the common dramatic trope of cheating husband leaves his wife for another woman. The absolute insult of this book and this plot, just, I feel for Evelyn, who has not only been cheated on by her, but is now responsible for her clone that her husband had made of her. And Martine, who is her clone, she also gets a really shitty end of the stick too, since technically her existence is illegal. Her entire world was just Evelyn's husband, and she was created with this purpose to be exactly what Evelyn was not. Evelyn is career-driven and headstrong and does not apologize ever in the book. And Martine is the exact opposite of her personality-wise. In fact, a lot of Martine's character is just like the ideal woman, like an absolute insult of this very submissive person. She doesn't have any wrinkles, she doesn't have any stretch marks or freckles. She was literally created because Evelyn's husband wanted to have kids, but Evelyn had no interest in kids and she was focused on her career, so he made Martine to have children with him. It's just such a brilliant book to talk about misogyny, and just so much more I could say about it, but then we're heading straight into spoiler town, and I don't want to ruin it, but it's such a fascinating book. Really heavy at times, but all of it is so incredibly and beautifully nuanced, so done tastefully, and it ends well too, so our heroes haven't suffered for nothing. And lastly, these series I've been reading this month. I have been rereading the Animorphs, which Animorphs is a science fiction children's series about kids that can morph into animals. They were given this power by alien technology in order to fight off the Yeerks, which are slug-like aliens that are parasitic, and they go into people's heads and they control their bodies. There's so much memeing on this series because their book covers look really weird and slightly concerning. I used to read this series as a kid. I remember even before I read this series, I was like so obsessed with the covers. I thought they were the coolest thing ever, and I remember not being old enough to read chapter books like this, but every time I went to the library, I wanted to look at the older kids' books just to look at the covers of Animorphs. It's so weird, but it's such a strong memory in my brain. It was such a big moment in my life when I finally was old enough to take out this book and read them. And I absolutely loved them at the time, but I never finished the series. It's 54 books long, without any of the tie-in novels included. And I don't remember why I didn't finish them. I don't think I ever really finished any series as a kid, probably why I am, as an adult, not really fond of reading many series, because I just don't finish them. I know I depended exclusively on getting these books from the library, so I think likely what happened is that I was unable to get books after a certain point, and probably just moved on to a different book or a different series and kind of forgot about reading these. One of the things I loved about these books as a kid is how unforgiving they were almost. I was so used to reading things where it was like, you know, there's danger, but everything's okay in the end. And this book was very serious about its consequences. Within the first book, and this is a minor spoiler, but there's a rule that the kids can only stay in their morphed animal form for 2 hours or else they're stuck, and at the end of the first book, one of the kids gets stuck as an animal and remains as an animal, I think for the rest of the book, but I am only 5 books in, so I don't know if he ever becomes human again. Later on in the series, I'm going to find out. In the first couple of books in the series, the kids really struggle with these new powers, and they take on these big challenges, and in the end they get out alive, but they don't really succeed with what they do. It's almost like they move forward an inch but back a foot, which I kind of liked. It doesn't just guarantee that success is going to happen in these books just because they are the heroes. They also manage to raise the stakes with each book somehow, which like for 54 books in the series, if they're going to continue to raise the stakes with each novel, I can't even imagine where we're going to end up by the final book. But it really helps keep the interest there. It's not like overly formula driven like I think most long children's series are. There is a little bit of a randomness factor in it. What isn't my favorite about this book, and I'm going to give the excuse that I'm not the target audience for these books. Kids are. It's not supposed to be for me, so it's okay. They all begin the same way. They all begin with a general statement of, my name is Jake, my name is Cassie, and I can't tell you my last name, I can't tell you where I live because of this invasion going on, and that it would put myself and our efforts in danger to tell you that information, which gets a little boring after a couple of books of reading like that, and they can be repetitious at times. Every single one of the books I read so far have referenced the exact moments of how the kids got this power, and reminds readers of what's at stake, what are they up against, which is kind of helpful if you're not reading these back to back, or you're a child so you don't really want to be confused, as well as I think it's possible you could probably pick up books not in order, which is helpful for a really long children's series. I guarantee some of the longer series I didn't read in order. I would just grab whatever book I could find in the series and read it. I'm really determined to read all 54 books because I just want to know what happens. So let me know in the comments below if you are interested in seeing me do a video specifically about the Animorphs, going over each of the books in excruciating detail. I will do it if people are interested, but also depends on if I finish reading these books. Like, if I don't finish reading them, I'm not gonna do it. But if I do, and literally no one wants to see this video, I'm gonna make the video anyway, so let me know how March went for you as far as reading goes. How many books did you read? What was your favorite? Which was your least favorite? I don't know if I have a least favorite. I think like the third Animorphs book I didn't like as much, even though I was really expecting to like it because it followed Tobias, who was my favorite character in the series growing up. He's the kid who is stuck as an animal. But yeah, I was kind of just about the book. As far as my favorite, I really liked all the other ones. There's a couple that I'm gonna highly consider for my top reads at the end of the year when I filmed that video. I don't have a lot planned out for what I'm gonna read next month. I started reading Galactic Hellcats by Marie Vibert. If you haven't noticed, I'm really trying to read all of my 2021 releases. So I'm nearly caught up with what 2021 releases I own now, but I think 2 are coming out next month. One, I'm pretty sure Becky Chambers' new book comes out. I think so, because it's already out in the UK. And I think Charlie Jane Anders' new book is coming out next month too, which I also pre-ordered. So those I'm gonna try to read as soon as I can. And like I said, I'm currently reading Galactic Hellcats, which I'll talk about more next month.